Imagine sitting in your living room. The television is on. Your mother hasn't touched her dinner. Your father hasn't said a word in 20 minutes. And somewhere across the country, a man is reaching into a glass jar, and the number he pulls out might be your birthday. This is not a story about politics. This is not a story about Vietnam. This is a story about one night, December 1st, 1969, when the United States government decided the fates of millions of young men with a lottery. And the most terrifying part? The whole country watched it happen live. To understand why that night hit so hard, you have to understand the fear that had been building for years. By 1969, the Vietnam War had already consumed nearly 40,000 American lives. Every week, the news brought body counts. Every month, more letters arrived in mailboxes across the country, stiff, official envelopes with the return address of the Selective Service System. Inside those envelopes were just two words that could unravel a young man's entire life. Greetings. You are hereby ordered to report. The draft had existed in some form since World War II, but by the late 1960s, it had become something that felt deeply, personally unfair. College students could get deferments. Young men with the right connections, the right doctors, or the right paperwork could escape service. Meanwhile, working-class boys, kids who couldn't afford college, kids from small towns and city projects, were being shipped overseas in disproportionate numbers. The public knew it, the soldiers knew it, and eventually, the government knew it had a problem. So in 1969, under President Richard Nixon, officials announced a new system, a lottery. Every birthday, all 366 of them, including February 29th, would be assigned a number. Men born on the birthday that received number 1 would be drafted first, number 2 next, and so on, all the way down the list. On the surface, it sounded clean. It sounded fair. It sounded like math instead of favoritism. But nothing about what happened that December night was quite what it seemed. The date was set, December 1st, 1969. The place was Selective Service National Headquarters in Washington, D.C., but the event would be broadcast live on television across the country. In dormitories at college campuses, students crowded around small black and white sets, some with beers in their hands that they were too anxious to drink. In suburban living rooms, families sat in near silence, mothers gripping their husbands' arms, fathers staring at the screen with expressions carved from stone. In apartments in New York, in farmhouses in Iowa, in trailers in rural Georgia, young men who were 19, 20, 21 years old waited. Many of them had never paid this kind of attention to a television broadcast in their lives. The mechanics of the lottery were straightforward, almost clinical. Officials had taken 366 blue plastic capsules, one for every day of the year, and placed them inside a large glass container. Each capsule held a small slip of paper with a date written on it. The capsules would be drawn one by one. The first birthday drawn would be assigned lottery number 1. The men born on that date would almost certainly be called to serve. The theory was that the military would work its way through the list until it had enough men. Historically, anyone with a lottery number below 195 was considered virtually certain to be drafted. The room where the drawing took place was almost aggressively ordinary. There was a podium, there were officials in suits, there was Congressman Alexander Pirney of New York, a World War II veteran, who was selected to reach into the jar and draw the first capsule. He reached in. He pulled out the first blue capsule. He opened it. September 14th. Somewhere across America, young men born on September 14th went very, very quiet. Some of them had known this moment was coming for weeks. But knowing something is coming and having it arrive are two entirely different things. In the time it took a man on television to unfold a small piece of paper, thousands of young American lives changed direction. The drawing continued. October 18th, April 24th, December 30th. The capsules kept coming, and with each one, you could almost hear the exhale of relief, or the silent free fall of dread in living rooms across the country. Young men were doing the math in real time. If your birthday had already been called, you stopped counting. If it hadn't, you kept watching, kept calculating, kept asking yourself, how many numbers have they read? How many are left? Where am I going to fall? Some men grabbed pen and paper, writing down every date as it was announced, building their own private ranking of fortune and fate. Some sat motionless, like they were afraid to breathe and disturb whatever luck was left in the room. By the end of the night, all 366 dates had been assigned numbers. For the men with the lowest numbers, the ones drawn first, the path forward was suddenly, terrifyingly clear. Unless they could secure a deferment, they were going to Vietnam. Some of them accepted it. Some of them went to Canada. Some of them had breakdowns. Some of them sat at kitchen tables with their fathers and didn't say a single word for hours. For the men with high numbers, 300, 320, 350, there was relief so profound it almost felt shameful, because relief meant someone else was going instead, and many of those young men carried that guilt for years. The lottery separated friends. It separated brothers. Two men born 3 days apart could end up on opposite sides of a line that meant one went to war and one did not. A birthday, something you had celebrated every year of your life, something you had absolutely no control over, had just become the hinge point of your entire future. One man who received a low number described it later like this. He said it felt as though the whole world had been sorted into two groups overnight, and he had woken up in the wrong one. But here is where the story gets darker. In the days and weeks after the lottery, statisticians and researchers began examining the results, and what they found was disturbing. The capsules had not been mixed properly. Officials had loaded the capsules into the container month by month, starting with January and ending with December, but they hadn't stirred or shaken the container thoroughly enough to truly randomize the order. As a result, the December birthdays, the last ones to go into the jar, had a higher tendency to float near the top. They were more likely to be drawn early. The numbers bore this out. Birthdays in the later months of the year, particularly November and December, received significantly lower draft numbers, on average, than birthdays earlier in the year. A man born in December was statistically more likely to be drafted than a man born in March, not because of anything he had done, not because of any characteristic he possessed, but because the people running the lottery hadn't mixed a jar properly. The government had promised randomness. What it had delivered was a different kind of injustice. Not the visible, obvious kind that everyone could point to, but the invisible kind that hid behind the appearance of fairness. Some statisticians published analyses. Some newspapers ran stories. A few congressmen raised questions, but the lottery moved forward. Men with the wrong birthdays in the wrong months shipped out. The government ran a second lottery in 1970 with two separate drums, one for birthdays and one for numbers, mixed more thoroughly, attempting to correct what had gone wrong. But for the men who had drawn their fates on December 1st, 1969, the correction came too late. Between 1970 and 1973, over 850,000 men had their fates determined by the lottery system. Some went willingly, some went terrified. Some went and came back different. Some went and didn't come back at all. And some, the ones with high numbers, the ones who exhaled in relief that December night, spent the rest of their lives quietly wondering what it meant that they had been saved by a birthday. The 1969 Vietnam Draft Lottery has since become one of the most studied examples of what happens when a government tries to manufacture fairness through randomness, and falls short. It sits at the intersection of mathematics, morality, and war. It raises questions that don't have clean answers. Is a random lottery more just than a system based on merit or need? Is an imperfect lottery better than the arbitrary favoritism it replaced? And when the stakes are this high, when the outcome is life, death, or permanent injury, does the method of selection matter as much as the selection itself? There are no tidy answers. There weren't in 1969, and there aren't now. What remains is the image of that room, that glass jar, those blue capsules, and millions of American families on a Monday night in December, sitting in front of their televisions, waiting to find out whether the day they were born would determine where they would die. History is full of moments that remind us how little control we have over the currents that shape our lives. But very few of those moments happened on live television, in real time, while the people most affected sat at home and watched. The men who drew the lowest numbers that night did not choose to go to war. The men who drew the highest numbers did not choose to stay home. They were not braver or more cowardly than each other. They were just born on different days. That is the part that stays with you. Not the policy, not the politics, not the statistics, just the simple, staggering randomness of it all, and the knowledge that for thousands of young Americans, everything came down to a piece of paper in a blue plastic capsule. and the hand of a congressman they had never met. Your life, your future, decided in seconds by a birthday you didn't choose in a jar that wasn't mixed well enough.